This video is my immediate reaction to the Lions' 27-13 loss to the Packers on the road in Green Bay. Look, about as bad as things could have gone, excluding turnovers, other than the Goff interception in the second quarter. Let's go down the laundry list of things that went wrong, and the score 27-13 doesn't necessarily reflect how things were. We know the late amazing touchdown catch by Isaac Tesla, really made things look closer on the scoreboard than they were. You lose the battle on the line of scrimmage on both sides by a large degree. Cannot generate any big plays on offense at all. In the first half, the defense gives up 7.7 yards per play. Looked really slow, lethargic, borderline unprepared defensively. You lose the field position battle definitely in the second quarter and the fourth. Green Bay had two short fields in both of those situations. That's why I say lose the field position battle. Basically, you end up punting in such a manner that the other team gets the ball on your side of the 50 or whereabouts. Also, you forfeit a pick six on a somewhat tough call on Rock Ya-Sin. That's an amazing play by Brian Branch, if you ask me. And then you go on the road and all of that, only lose to a very motivated, fired up, juiced up, pumped up Green Bay team by the media and certainly the announcers, 27-13. My point is there's no such thing, and certainly this is not one of them, as a loss that you're okay with. But with all of those things being said, I would have expected the differential to be quite larger. The expectations for Detroit are far higher and better than losing in Week 1 to the Packers. You're certainly not glad to compete, and in fact, it didn't for most of the game. But that's about as bad as the Lions have played since I really started paying attention to them in 2022. You're welcome to remember other games within the stretch. I'm talking about the road loss against the Carolina Panthers in 2022. Really, that was the difference between making the playoffs that year and not. And then the home loss to the Packers on Thanksgiving Day in 2023, this same Packers team in many ways. I'm not including last year's NFC divisional round loss to Washington because the defense at that point was so compromised by injuries. This one was not. It's Week 1. You're healthy. And clearly Kelvin Shepard's group, at least for the first half, has a long way to go, right? The Packers effectively up, I think, 17-6 in the fourth quarter. There was a couple of possessions there where the Detroit defense played better, and Green Bay gets a short field there. I think there's about 13 minutes left in the game. There's a lot of things here not to like, in my opinion, besides just the final score and the differential in quality of play, specifically the offensive and defensive line. I'm going to focus on two moments or two situations that I think illustrate some dynamics to be a little bit more concerned about than just the final score. This is actually not one of them, even though this is a huge element. The offensive line clearly had trouble in pass pro. They also could not get the run game going, only finished with 46 yards on the ground. Jahmyr Gibbs completely limited by the Packers defense. 19 touches for 50 yards. Really, he had no space other than the one run in the first half. And even on that one, I think it's a first quarter run on the second possession, Gibbs has to bounce away from the intended point of attack. He has to bounce to the weak side of the formation. The one bright spot that we'll focus on in video form this week, among other things to talk about, is the late touchdown catch by Tesla. Definitely cover that in video form, probably early Monday morning. It was a brilliant, almost shocking touchdown catch, right? I was glad to see that they declared it a touchdown. Originally had been ruled incomplete. I thought it was pretty obvious that it had a chance to be ruled as a touchdown, and lo and behold, it was. The two dynamics I want to focus on that kind of alarm or maybe bother me more is, first of all, the penalties. Early in the game, I thought there was a 6-1 differential in the first 7 penalties that were called, and I'm not talking about the refs. There's a couple of them you could argue about whatever. I'm talking about even in the preseason, to my memory, there were situations where Detroit's committing a lot of penalties, and that concerned me. I think a couple of people even commented in the video, in the comment section on the video that I did, and I actually mentioned it in 2 of them as well. We saw it in those games, and maybe we glossed over it because it's the preseason. So let's cover the one big one, right? The penalty on Ya-Sin, who is not a starting corner for you, but still it ends up taking away either a touchdown or possession of the ball in the third quarter. With the team playing as poor as you could imagine, generally, turning the ball over once in the red zone in the second quarter, Goff's interception, I'll kind of talk about that play a little bit here in a moment. This play, the penalty on Ya-Sin, you may not like me focusing on it so much, given that the offensive and defensive lines got their ass kicked. And the imbalance in quality of offensive play was so stark, was such a big difference. And the pass rush as well for the Packers was huge and immediately lacking for Detroit. But I think the penalties and occasional lack of discipline are worthy of some discussion. The run game generation was shocking today. 22 carries, I think, for 46 yards. The only other games to my memory that I was able to find recently, Detroit had 48 rushing yards against the Bills last year in that crazy home loss in, I think, Week 14. And then only had 40 rushing yards in the early season loss at home, once again, to the Bucs early in 2023. A couple of other games less than 100, overall, but very rarely anything like this, right? The penalties, specifically the one on Yasin, and the lack of discipline, they bother me and alarm me a little bit more than maybe the rest of you. Branch, had the early penalty where he threw a guy's helmet. I kind of didn't see that play live, and then I was charting, and I looked up, saw the replay. Clearly, he doesn't have to do that. But there's some perhaps less obvious examples of discipline that I want to bring to your attention. On Green Bay's touchdown drive to take a 24-6 lead in the second half, both Branch and Anzalone kind of jump or hedge to the inside on run plays by Josh Jacobs. Basically, they were put in a position to have a particular gap, or in the case of Anzalone, he was the force player. That looked really different to me. I get it. At that point, the game is already on a certain trajectory. In some sense, it's been lost by that point in time, right? I get it. But watching the Lions so closely over the last few years, those things didn't occur very often, either on the defensive side or the offensive side. Basically, where someone is in the wrong place assigned to where they're assigned to be. And the fact that it was Branch and Anzalone, one of them ended up being a 15-yard run by Jacobs to the outside. I thought Yasin may have gotten held on that play. On the live version, the replay didn't look as bad. The other one by Anzalone only ended up being a 7-yard gain. And again, the game is already, is no longer in doubt really at that point. Green Bay's going to get a field goal. If you recall, they go for it on a 4th and 1. QB sneak by Love to get it. Otherwise, it could have been 20-6 at that point. Turns out to be 24-6 on the touchdown run by Jacobs. Those moments stuck out to me. I get it that the win probability in the fourth quarter is low, but being in the wrong place at the wrong time is just not something that Branch and Anzalone do. They were stretched. The defense was stretched today beyond the ability to be efficient. And those are just things that mentally, I have not associated with the Lions at all in recent years, along with the penalty, which negated the second opportunity really for the Lions to claw back into the game. I'm talking about the one that ended up being called on Yasin. It's an unreal play by Branch. Gets them to within 17-13. We all knew with the amount of flags that were on the field that one of them was probably going to be on the Lions. I don't know about you. I was just hoping that one of them was on the Packers as well. Worst case scenario, right? Offsetting, and perhaps both of them occur after the interception. I don't know how that would have worked out, but you would have hoped that the offense would get the ball back. But that ruined a brilliant moment, if you ask me. If Detroit gets the ball there, right, down 17-6, you have the opportunity to pull within 17. We know that's 4-down situation for Detroit. So Campbell and John Morton are going to go for 17-13 completely, right? My point in belaboring the point there is that the margin for error today was very small. In fact, it was probably over in the negative. The penalties for me are something that could ruin, they could ruin. That's a borderline historic play by Branch. That would be on his career highlight film. And in this case, an entire game. Those are things that have to be eliminated. They just have to be eliminated. Now, on the same play, you had the penalty on Hutchinson. I'll talk about that for a moment. Probably sounds a little bit like sour grapes as someone who's clearly rooting for the Lions. We're really not playing football if we literally have to avoid one player on the field on a turnover. To me, and you may think this sounds unrealistic, if the quarterback wants to be treated like a spectator on interception or a fumble return, the quarterback, he should have to go down to the ground to remove himself as a target. So we get film and we get pictures of him on the internet laying down on the ground to remove himself as a potential target. You say that's ridiculous. It's an artificial rule already. Now, it didn't matter because the hold on Yasin, really probably should have been called. The initial hold is within the 5 yards of being able to make contact, and so I get it. That one probably wouldn't have been called. But then the one where he kind of puts his arm around the guy, that one clearly I think they've got to call. The other big moment was, as far as being a swing factor, was the second quarter interception by Goff. To that point, I think he had relied on St. Brown, obviously, for a couple of third down conversions, and the one brilliant catch along the right sideline. I think it was like a 2nd and 7. Evan Williams, the safety for Green Bay, he jumps it, right? St. Brown's checking his route up, maybe a 5, 6, 7-yard route. That's kind of interesting to me because he was before the line to gain, so perhaps I had my down and distance wrong there. I thought it was a 3rd and 6, maybe it was 3rd and 8. It's no problem for the Lions if St. Brown catches it short, right? They're going to go for it on 4th down. Then St. Brown clearly would have a chance if he catches it quick enough, and I think that's the point. Goff is trying to get the ball to St. Brown quick enough such that he can catch it and turn and try to get the conversion, either a 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, whatever. It's a great play by Williams. I mean, you have to give him credit. He recognized St. Brown as the guy that Goff was going to. I think St. Brown's 3 of 3 at that point catches, and he's been talking a lot of shit to the Packers sideline and players on the field. On this day, that was a moment where Goff, for whatever reason, he made a decision, and it didn't work out in the Lions' favor. I mean, you could blame Goff. Obviously, it ends up going to being an interception that played a huge role. But I think you guys got to kind of give credit to Evan Williams defensively for, taking what was there. And to that point, and even throughout the whole day, Detroit had not been able to throw the ball downfield at all, right? We had the third quarter situation where Laporta gets a pretty big gain, maybe 30-plus yard gain, the opening possession of the third quarter, I believe. Otherwise, the Lions had extreme trouble with zone coverages by the Packers, essentially keeping everything in front. That's definitely something I want to focus on this week and look at. It certainly won't be a complimentary video, but hopefully that's what you signed up for. If you're watching my channel, you're going to get what I think is reality, to the best of my knowledge. And it's a little surprising to me that the Packers were able to just repeat such a simple formula on each possession, or each series of downs, I should say. Stop the run on 1st down, and then play zone and rush 4 in front of it, thereafter. In some cases, they brought more than 4, right? But basically, conceptually, Green Bay was not allowing anything to be completed beyond 10 to 12 yards, if that. Romo covered it very well. He kept saying eyes on the quarterback. But in zone, you're not staring at the quarterback the whole time, so he's saying something. I understand what he's saying, and he's correct. But there's a moment in time when you want to do that. But in any case, I think John Morton and the offensive staff will possibly see more of that next week, starting against the Bears. If you're not able to generate more in the run game, 46, 47 yards maybe on the ground total, that's unexpected for Detroit. It's not going to continue, right? Montgomery and Gibbs, too much talent for them to not have any impact at all. And it started early, right? I think Gibbs had the first 5 or 6 touches. Meaning the opening 5 or 6 snaps of the game, and he only generated 20 yards out of that, I think. That one of his touches, in fact, was negated because of an offsides by Williams. To that point, the penalty differential was like 4-1. I'm writing it down like, what is going on here? But in any case, the foundation from Green Bay's defense standpoint was laid, right? Stop the run in any form or fashion early and force them to throw the ball against our zone coverages. And Goff is smart. He's intelligent. He doesn't throw interceptions generally. The one by Evan Williams, I think you got to kind of tip your cap to Evan Williams and understand what Goff is trying to do, get the ball out to St. Brown quickly to allow him to turn and get the 1st down. That's why the route, I think, was short of the sticks, the line to gain. Other than, the second quarter drive, that is 9 minutes, I believe, Detroit's second possession, the one that got them a field goal to pull within 10-3, right, in the second quarter. The deficit, unfortunately, grows to 17-3 at halftime, courtesy of that interception. Could have changed the dynamic along with the pick 6 by Branch that got taken back for 2 penalties. I do want to highlight that second drive to illustrate just how difficult it was for Goff and the Lions to get things done on this day, at least. Am I saying it's going to be like that all the time? No, that's not what I expect. But this is the second drive, and it is kind of move that up a little bit. If you don't know, if you're just tuning into my channel, I chart every play offensively and defensively. Let me stop lying. I actually did stop starting there on the last 2 possessions for the Lions when they went into just, haywire pass mode. At that point, there's no reason for me to do so. We know what this final score of the game, who the winner's going to be. But look at the gains. You do have Gibbs bouncing outside. Again, this is the Lions' second possession. From left to right columns, down and distance, yard, personnel formation. Run pass with direction. I try to put the boundary in there when I can. I omitted it completely on this drive, meaning if you've got Trey left, the second play, I guess, the one's in bold, from the 1st and 15 from the -5, Trey left under center, I'm guessing the ball was on the left hash, or right hash, excuse me. I'm guessing the ball was on the right hash. So the tray, the two tight ends, and the receiver is to the field. Generally, that's what you're going to get. And I think in my reaction videos, at least for my tracking here, I'd like to kind of reflect that. Gibbs bounced it outside for 14 on that play. Maybe it was 15 officially. Just, not taking the ball where it was supposed to go because it was totally clogged up. This was a good read by Gibbs. The 2nd and 12 completion to St. Brown, I thought it was incomplete live, and then they showed the replay. I was like, oh, man, why should we be surprised that St. Brown, gets his feet inbounds first almost before catching the ball. A little bit of a delay run to Montgomery. I usually use DM because his last name is so long for 5 yards. Other than that, the run's just not much being generated at all. The one that disappointed me a little bit was a reverse play to Jamison Williams. He jukes the inside linebacker who's there to make the play. Again, this is in the second quarter. For you guys, this is a 1st and 10 from the 30, the positive 30. I don't put the positive. I just don't put the negative, which indicates that you're on the other side of the 50. 1st and 10 from the 30, 12 personnel. Reverse to Williams. He juked the inside linebacker, and he only got 3 yards. I guess he stepped out of bounds, right? He had an awesome completion to St. Brown for 8 yards on a 3rd and 5. And then a 3rd and 5 where it looked like the Packers were going to bring heavy pressure, and they only brought 3. This is all the way at the bottom for you guys. 3rd and 5 from the 12-yard line, 11 personnel. And it ends up being incomplete to Laporta. I think it looks like man by the time Goff gets there for us watching the broadcast, but my suspicion is it's probably zone, and that guy, whoever it was, a corner or a nickel, had matched up with Laporta into the boundary at that point. My notes, everything is difficult. There just seems to be no feel on the coverages by play call. Can we make a large statement about John Morton there? No. It's one game, and oftentimes you get really anomalous results in week 1. Thinking back to the Patriots' first Super Bowl, long time ago, 25 years ago, I guess, 24. Their first game of the season get blown out by the Buffalo Bills. And in fact, they had traded away one of their defensive stars to the Buffalo Bills, and they got hammered in week 1. Came back and defeated the Bills later in the season and won the Super Bowl in their first upset over the Rams. My point in bringing that up is that's still within your realm of possibility. You should not attempt to not be critical here. I would say go ahead and be critical because, Morton and Shepard signed up for this, right? They signed up to be the offensive and defensive coordinators for a great football team, and that's what you want. So you're not wrong in being critical and harsh in your assessment of those guys, especially because both sides of the ball underperformed. I have no trouble with people being negative in that regard. It's a long season. You got 16 games left. I will say that today, kind of no matter what coverages Shepard called, with the inability to get pass rush on Jordan Love, I'm not sure what you were going to get done. You can talk about Terrion Arnold's coverage all you want. Some of the other plays where they're beating man, fine. But with 0 pass rush at all early, I mean 0. It might have even been negative pass rush early. So at some point, your DBs are going to get beat. At some point, a guy is going to be open. There's just no way to cover that long at times. And I also think that the coverages Shepard played early were a little bit obvious to Jordan Love. It seemed like he had a great handle on what coverages were going to be played. No trouble at all diagnosing things and then getting the ball out to certain guys. The touchdown to, I think it's Dobbs, maybe it's Reed, I'm not sure, can't remember exactly, in the first half. He does beat Terrion Arnold, but it's a pick play. They force Arnold to go underneath. Hey, there's 3 receivers over there to the field, and all 3 corners for the Lions are lined up. That's man. We pretty much know what call to make. They didn't really have to motion, meaning the route was probably predetermined if you got man, and then if it looked like zone, another route would occur. I was surprised at how easy it looked for Love to throw the football. Very few attempts. When they did attempt to disguise things, it almost seemed like Shepard overcompensated. It almost seemed like he went too far, if you will. There's a zone drop of Davenport, I think, once. Zone dropping Hutchinson twice, meaning dropping those guys out in coverage. I think that they could do better from a coordination standpoint than they did today. And you probably should too, right? I think they're going to play better defensively. It was a really poor first half overall. I do have significant notes from the first half. I'm really going to transition to that. I know that sounds backwards because I've already talked about the overall game. Here's what I had at half. I try to make note of stats. Detroit's only averaging 3.8 yards per play, really low, something that we're not used to at all. Well, when you get to the end of the game, it's also 3.8 yards per play. So those numbers held. The Packers are playing downhill. These are some of my notes. Green Bay averaging 7.7 yards per play. Only 8 first downs, but they got the short field once and then also hit the big play up top. And I want to kind of mention that one. It's on their third possession, a play action. Love goes up top to Jaden Reed. And I think he crosses Terry Arnold's face on a post. There's no safety there. That play is extremely similar to me to the one that LaFleur and the Packers opened up the game in 2023. I know I'm going back a long time. Thanksgiving Day in 2023. To my memory, the first completion there was to Christian Watson on a borderline mirrored image of the concept. Play action and going up top. Basically, the reason why I bring up that play and make that connection, I know we're talking about 2 seasons, is because Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers staff seemed to know the coverages they were getting with a high degree of certainty. And I wonder if there's got to be a little bit more done in disguising things, but not going so far. I wonder about just some basic cover 3, some basic cover 2 at times. It seemed to me there was this either really heavily man pressure or dropping guys out to try to disguise things, and it didn't seem like either one of them worked early to me. Again, these are my notes that I put at the first half, so there may be some level or a high level of inaccuracy with what I'm saying, but I'm literally reading out to you kind of what I said. Love was 12 of 16 passing and had all day to throw the first 3 possessions. No pressure at all, whether they played man, zone, Love and the wide receiver core totally in tune, and I thought the DBs for the Lions had no favors done to them by their coaches and the lack of pass rush. To that point, at halftime, Green Bay has 0 first downs gained on the ground. They did get things going a little bit more with the rushing game, after halftime. I think Josh Jacobs finished with 66 yards, but he's still at 3.5 yards per carry. Some of my notes or my thoughts were, Goff is 13 of 16 passing. The interception was huge, but no generation at all of those consistent 6-7 yard run games that create a 2nd and 3. Or, create, when if it's a 2nd and 8, create a 3rd and 1. Those things just did not occur today. Despite Goff being 13 of 16 passing in the first half, he only has 75 yards. Everything was labored. Everything was short. St. Brown was 3 for 4 on catches to targets. That one interception, I think at this point actually it was a 3rd and 7, so I know I misspoke earlier. I didn't think Williams caught it at first. I just didn't live. I was like, that looks like the ball hit the ground. And then they kind of shifted or changed the angle. And you're like, oh, okay, he actually did. He used his leg, to keep the ball from touching the ground. It's a great play. Right now, I'm just willing to give him credit, given that Goff, I think, was trying to get rid of the ball early, and it's a play that you don't expect the guy to just jump in front of St. Brown. But in any case, Green Bay's defense, they looked fast. And they really gave Detroit little room to operate, other than St. Brown early, who was making plays, and then Laporta in the third quarter and the second half. I think he finished with 6 or 7 catches, he being Laporta. And then the touchdown catch by Tesla. Romo, I thought, did a good job of covering the lack of ability to generate a run game, yet Green Bay's defenders were getting great depth and not giving up any big plays. Everything that was completed, most everything, I should say, was in front. Gibbs at halftime was 10 touches for 31 yards. So I was just willing to give the Packers credit for how they're limiting opportunities in the pass game, yet also stopping or slowing down the run. Goff's longest completion, I thought, was for 19 yards, and that was the one to St. Brown along the right sideline. At that point, to halftime, Love had 4 receivers and 1 tight end who all had catches of 10 yards or more. You had a 48-yarder, a 26-yarder, I think a 16 and a 15-yarder. That was the touchdown to Tucker Kraft. Detroit, no pressure at all on that first drive. Just 0 pass rush, in fact, is what I wrote down multiple times. That drive ended with a touchdown to Kraft. Like I said, it's over Jack Campbell. I think it looks like a cover 2, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's 2-man. I don't know why you'd have Jack Campbell in man on the tight end, so I suspect it was actually a zone. And Loft, give him credit, he's throwing it over top of the linebacker level, in between the safeties. And Love, I think, was 6 of 8 passing on the drive, 12 plays, 83 yards. Again, I want to draw a comparison between that first drive and how in control Green Bay was with the pass game, and that first drive, Thanksgiving Day 2023. Maybe it was the second drive, but I don't think so. I thought Green Bay opened that game up with an absolutely dominant drive, and today looked very similar. How does that relate to this team moving forward? Maybe it means that LaFleur saw the same coverage looks from this defense for today. LaFleur and Love, I should say, saw the same coverage looks, and they were able to capitalize easy. I'm not sure. A little surprising to me that the offense wasn't able to get more going. Specifically, guys like Jamison Williams, St. Brown. St. Brown only finished with 4 or 5 catches, maybe, but it wasn't even 50 yards total. That's surprising because he's been so good against all of these teams in the division. Would I be alarmed or scared or worried if I were you, a Lions fan, about this repeating itself every week? No, this is worst case scenario. This is really, to me, about as bad as it's going to get. So, will it get 10% better next week, 20% better, 30%? My estimation right now is that things on the offensive side would get 40 to 50% better. The Bears have a good, young, athletic defense. They're fast. They're going to look at what happened here, stop the run on first down, and then play zone behind it, second and third down, and force Goff to throw the ball underneath and let our pass rushers attack. If the Lions' offensive line doesn't play any better, yeah, it's possible that that formula can be repeated, certainly. Do I expect that to happen? No, I do not. Unless or until, we see this dynamic created or repeated, I should say, 2 or 3 or 4 more times. I think this is the worst that you're going to see out of the Detroit Lions this season, and I could be really wrong. People could call me out 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, or 8 weeks from now and say, Coach, you were really wrong. This Lions team's going to struggle all year. I just don't see it that way. Too much talent on the offensive side specifically. I think the defense is the side that actually concerns me a little more, in that things look so easy for Love to pick up on, and this is week 1. Normally, the defense starts out ahead. The defense is not the side that can be predicted so easily, and today, at least, LaFleur and Love were absolutely in control, really starting from the first drive moving forward. In any case, this is my reaction video to the Lions. Still surprising loss, 27-13 for me. If you had said to me, Coach, the Lions are going to lose in week 1 on the road to Green Bay, I would have said 27-24. I would have said defense struggles, the offense has to settle for a field goal once or twice. Maybe they end up losing 27-21, something like that, because Campbell goes for it 2 or 3 times and actually doesn't get a field goal and either gets a touchdown or turns the ball over. I would not have anticipated 27-6 or what turned out to be 27-13, the ridiculous sick catch by Tesla, being the difference. In any case, if you guys enjoyed the video or at least appreciate my thoughts on the matter, then please consider commenting in the video. That drives the exposure of the video to be pushed out to larger audiences. And if you think more Lions fans should be given an opportunity to listen to my thoughts on the matter and my stop sign on panicking completely for the 2025 season, basically, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.